Welcome to MindShift Power Podcast, the only international podcast focused on teens, connecting young voices and perspectives from around the world. Get ready to explore the issues that matter to today's youth and shape tomorrow's world. I'm your host, Fatima Bey, the MindShifter. And welcome, everyone. Today we have with us Luis Romano, and he is from New Jersey. He's an author, and today we're going to talk about his book called Zip Code, which is really, really interesting. So how are you doing today, Luis?
I'm great, Fatima. The only thing is I'm not from New Jersey. I'm from the Bronx. I have to correct you there. I live in New Jersey. I raised my family in New Jersey, but I'm a Bronx boy.
Yes.
From the projects.
I didn't mean to hurt your pride. I'm sorry.
No, okay.
You're forgiven. He's in New Jersey now.
Yeah, right. You're forgiven.
All right. So tell us a bit about your background. Who are you?
I was born in the Bronx, like I just said, and I went to Catholic school, which was good and bad for me. I'm a child of immigrants who came here from Sicily and Italy, so I had a kind of rough background growing up. The Bronx was kind of tough in those days. I went to college after I was told I couldn't, and then I started after business and after raising my family in New Jersey. I started writing novels. I started writing when I was 58 years old, believe it or not. And I'm old enough to be the grandfather of most of your listeners.
Yes, you are. Oh, back up for a second. You said you went to college after being told you couldn't. Could you briefly tell us about that?
All right. Senior year at St. Raymond's High School for boys in the Bronx. I was a bad student. I'm not going to lie. Mm-hmm. I'm not that gifted when it comes to math and sciences. I'm probably not that gifted with anything, but I have a creative mind. So that doesn't work when you're in a math science school. For me, it didn't. And I was in my senior year, and the Vietnam War was about to draft me to go fight in Vietnam, which I didn't want to do. And the brother asked me what I was going to do when I left St. Raymond's. And I said, I'm going to go to college, I think, brother. He said, well, don't waste your mother's money. I said, we don't have any money. I said, we live in a project. Well, there's no money to waste. He said, well, I don't mean the tuition. I mean the application fee. Don't even apply. He said, you're Italian. Take the sanitation department test in New York City. Work for the sanitation department. And I wanted to say what I wanted to say to him, but in those days, they used to beat the shit out of you, so I didn't say it. And I said, okay, brother, I'll see. And then he said, well, doesn't your family own a pizza shop or a restaurant? And they did. And it was a very famous place. And I said, yeah. He goes, well, go learn how to make a pizza pie. I mean, that was my advice as a senior in high school. Unfortunately, I listened to him. I went to a community college because we didn't have any money. Then I went to a state college in New Jersey. And then I went to graduate school in New Jersey. And I did okay in business. And then I had a really good business career in sales and left that after, 35, 40 years and decided to be a writer. I opened up a couple of businesses too with the money I had. So we did all right.
I want to say, I asked you about that because unfortunately, that was a long time ago, but unfortunately, there are kids today who are still being told that they can't do something or being guided into a lesser career than they're capable of. And that pisses me off.
Well, that's what Zip Code's about. I hate to step on your toes, but that's what Zip Code's about.
Yes, it is. So how many books have you written?
Last count, 21. Most of them are fiction, crime fiction, serial killer stuff. And I have a mafia series, and I have a serial killer series, and I have a couple of other standalone books. One we're promoting right now. It's about a couple of children that were separated at birth in Barranquilla, Colombia. And one becomes a drug dealer, the other becomes a nothing, and what happens to their lives. And that's a standalone book, and a couple of real life crime books. John A. Light is a mafia killer. Gene Borello is a mafia hitman, and another guy who's a Puerto Rican drug dealer. So I have 3 nonfiction books. But my forte is really fiction. I like to develop stories in my mind, and that's what my passion is.
What got you for the youth that are out there right now listening, who they might want to write something too, and they don't want to use AI. They want to use their own brains and use their own creativity and write something. How did you get into writing after working for so many years?
Well,
What really sparked that for you?
that's a great question, Fatima. I really always wanted to write, even as a boy. I don't know if you guys, your audience, ever heard of the Twilight Zone, but there was a TV show called The Twilight Zone, and I used to watch that on television and a few other movies and so forth. Some real feature films, and I used to be intrigued with how they came up with the story. Who wrote this story? Who made this story? And that stayed with me my whole life. And then I finally, at 58 years old, wrote a not such a great book, but some people liked it, and it started me writing more seriously. It wasn't my best book because you get better at what you do when you continue to do it.
Exactly.
I think my newest book is better than my first book, and I hope so. It just intrigued me to write, and then I finally did it. And it took me a long time to write the first one.
Wow. That's interesting. That's very interesting because it often does work that way. We try something out for the first time. We have these big dreams and visions, and we're like, I'm going to be great at this. And you will be if you keep doing it.
and you have to do some research on, even if you're writing about fiction, you got to do research to, because where are you going to write it? Do you know anything about where you're writing it? I mean, a lot of my stuff takes place in the Bronx, but it also takes place in Europe, where I visited. I was very blessed to be able to visit Europe, many cities around Europe and Boston, and I have a great memory for places that I've seen, and I've always intertwined them within my stories, and people are fascinated by the trips that I take them on in the books.
Well, it does sound interesting, actually.
Yeah, and one book, Intercession, we just got word that we're going to be able to get some money to make a feature film. So I'll believe that when I see it, but it's okay. I didn't write books to make movies. I wrote books so people can read them.
Right. Can I be an extra in a movie?
You got it. You got it.
I do not want to be an extra in a movie.
Well, and one of the books, they do kill a nun, so you could put you in a habit, No,
wait, you gonna kill me?
Yeah, yeah. We do a lot of killing in some of the books.
No, I know how much work goes into movies, so no.
Yeah.
A lot of work goes into
one of the reasons I wrote Zip Code, well, there's a lot of really more important reasons. But one reason was to prove to myself I could write a book without killing anybody. Nobody dies in Zip Code.
You challenge yourself.
I challenge myself.
Ourselves. So tell us now, we're here to talk about Zip Code. What is Zip Code about?
Well, Zip Code is about not being told where you're from should make the balance of the rest of your life. So I was from Zip Code 10472 in the Bronx, in the projects. And we were labeled as 10472. Poor kids, some ethnic, many ethnic. I grew up in mostly Puerto Ricans and blacks, and Italians, Jews, but mostly Puerto Ricans and blacks. Mm-hmm. And we were told that we were not good enough. Mm-hmm. Not even in those words, but subliminally, we were told we were not good enough. For example, in the book, all right, so two teenagers from Ridgewood, New Jersey, two seniors on a sociological experiment. Two kids from a very, very important, rich, wealthy school in New Jersey go to school in the South Bronx, and two kids from the Bronx, a black kid and a Puerto Rican girl, they go to school in New Jersey, in Ridgewood, and they live in this big mansion, and they in this fabulous school. When I was doing the research and at the schools, at DeWitt Clinton High School in the Bronx, where we did, it was a charter school now. The important thing was they said, okay, we have you have to meet the Einstein class, the kids who were called the smartest kids in the school, Einstein. And okay, so how do you get into the Einstein class? You have to have an 80 average. Well, to me, that's bullshit, because an 80 average is a B. I was a 77 average, so I'm not scoffing at an 80 average, man. But I could say that if you have an 80 average, yeah, you're you're not brilliant, you're okay, but you're not Einstein. But they put the bar low in the ethnic schools and the bad neighborhoods. They put the bar low, so you should be a 90 or a 95 to be in the Einstein group, not an 80. So they're setting the bar low.
So what's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that is that you don't achieve. You're not studying hard enough. You're not looking more. You're not doing more research or reading more, and you're not going to get there in real life. I mean,
in real life.
you could be happy as a waitress. I mean, my father was a waiter. My grandfather was a waiter. I mean, my other grandfather was a plumber. They were relatively happy. They didn't know any better. It was happy. But if you want more out of life, you got to go get it. You can't say, oh, because I'm black or because I'm Italian and they told me I can't do this, I'm going to not do it. And I'm just going to lay here and get my 80 average and I'll be an Einstein. No, because when you get out of school, the world changes.
Yes. And I agree with you. I cannot stand it when the bar is set lower um, for our people. And then when they get out in the real world, they're not matching up with their peers.
They're not.
They're not, and then they fail, and they fail in a much worse way because now your ego is like drop kicked in the forehead.
And no one
And
gives a shit about your race card. It's not going to happen anymore. People are not looking at your race card saying, oh, because I'm black, I should be considered an Einstein because I'm a B player. No, that's not working anymore. It's just not.
yes. And do you mind if we say what your age is?
I'm 74 years old. I was born in 1950.
And the reason I'm mentioning that is because I think it's a very large part of a lot of what you're saying is the era that you grew up in, because
Yeah.
our youth know a different world than what you grew up in. And I think it's important to note that because some of the stuff you're talking about and some of the stuff that's in your book is still an issue today.
Yeah,
We say it's not,
it
but it
is.
really is. And I like the fact that you're an old white guy saying some of the same stuff that young black people are already saying
Listen,
because they see it.
I'm sorry. I saw three of my sons grow up as teenagers. They're all grown up now. One went bad with drugs. And I live in a beautiful neighborhood. I live in a beautiful area. I made very, very good money with my career. They all went to good colleges. The third one didn't. It cost me more to keep him out of jail than it did to pay
Mm.
the colleges for my other two kids.
Oh wow.
They've all done well. He's done well, but he's not a good person. And we stay away from him. And it breaks
Wow.
my heart. And it breaks my heart because he got in with the wrong people with drugs at 13 years old. And daddy, who thought he was slick from the project, didn't even see it.
Mm.
So, everybody's got their own baggage, man, and I have baggage. And now I have a 13-year-old grandson who's the apple of my eye, and he's a basketball player. He thinks he's an NBA player. He's a terrific kid, and we have a great time watching him. So I've seen kids go through their teenage years as an adult and as a parent and as a grandparent. So I think I have something to say, and Zip Code said it, I think, very, very well.
Now, something I think is very interesting. I want the audience to know what inspired you to write the book.
Wow. Well, my own personal insults helped me. I wanted to show people that, okay, there was a young girl in my class. I went to Catholic school in the Bronx and Blessed Sacrament School. And in 1964, I graduated elementary school. So your readers are probably going, oh, shit, this guy's old. So I graduated elementary school in 1964. She was in the class of 1960, this young girl. And this is the idea behind Zip Code. So this girl had a couple of strikes against her in 1960. She was in my brother's class, and I remember her well. She was Puerto Rican. That was strike one.
Mm-hmm.
Hispanic. She was poor, dirt poor. She lived in the Bronxdale projects, and that
Oh
was a
wow.
pretty. My project was better than her project, and
Oh
if you
wow.
want to believe that, it was a bad project. And number three, and I hate to say this to you, Fatima, and don't get angry, but she was a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1960, a woman was not what a woman is in 2025.
Right.
They were subservient, so she had no chance of any success in her life. Well, she was so smart. Her father was dead. I think it was her mother, and I met her mother several times, and her I think her sister or brother. I don't remember that now. But anyway, this young girl went to a very good Catholic high school on scholarship because they were poor. It was called Cardinal Spellman High School in the Bronx. From there, she went to a little school nobody ever heard of called Princeton University, which is one of the biggest schools in the country, right?
Now, yeah.
Right. And it was then too. She went to Princeton University on scholarship, and all of a sudden now she's going to Yale Law School after that. Yale University, all Ivy League schools. This little Puerto Rican girl who had no future. So she got into the law business and blah, blah, blah. And now, fast forward, she's 4 years younger than me, so she's 70. And they named the projects after her, the Sonia Sotomayor houses. Now, if you don't know who Sonia Sotomayor is, she is a Supreme Court justice, one of 9 Supreme. So this little Puerto Rican girl from my school who had no shot for advancement became a Supreme Court justice. That's a lifetime acknowledgement. It's a job for lifetime. And I'm not saying I believe in her politics, but I believe in her. I believe in what she came to. And she wasn't the only one. General Colin Powell, there was so many ethnic people that came out of the neighborhoods that I lived in. And they became very successful people. Why? Because they wanted to. Because they had the internal something that said, I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to stay in the projects. I'm not going to stay in this bad neighborhood anymore. I'm going to do something with my life to make myself better, to make my family better, and to make myself more secure and have a happier life.
And I want to interject right there.
I'm so sorry. I talk too much. I know.
You're fine. But I want to say this right in this moment while you're saying what you're saying, because this is an international podcast. I want to talk to some of these kids that are in. Right now, we're talking about New York City and the Bronx and the poor areas in the U.S., but there are kids out in the village of Zimbabwe who need to understand and hear the principle that you're talking about, because it still applies for them too.
Absolutely.
You could be the poorest area. I don't care what your challenges are. And some of them have real serious challenges. You can still make it to wherever you want to make it if you are determined. I don't care what your society says. I don't care what the boundaries are. You can break through them. And that's what I love about Zip Code, is that it really is all about that, demonstrating some of us, some people of color, are what we already lived through, but also for some people who might not live through that, for them to understand that there are still differences. And although we've gotten better as a society, we haven't arrived. You know, we definitely haven't arrived. There's some of the same issues that you talk about in the 60s.
All over the world. Could be Nigeria. It could be Southern Italy. It could be France. It could be anywhere.
Yeah.
Northern Ireland, anywhere.
I love that. I knew that there were some things about Sotomayor, but I didn't know, all that you were telling me. And I was like, okay. Now I see why people like her so much, because of her story.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of people who have come from nothing, or have come from a place and rose to another place, whatever that is. Those kind of stories inspire me all the time.
But something, in my neighborhood when I was a kid, there was a lot of street money, especially with the Italian kids. There was money to be made illegally. The mob wanted us to work for them, and once you cross over that line, you're no longer a civilian. You're a mobster, and you could be killed for any reason they deem necessary. I decided not to go that way. I mean, I didn't think that was the right life to have. And that's really appealing. When I didn't have $300 to pay my last month's tuition in college at Montclair State University, I was offered $1,000 to make a delivery. I didn't know what the delivery was. Wow. I'm going to tell you, it wasn't mozzarella salami. They wanted me to make a delivery from one point to another for $1,000 in 1969. What my new car cost $2,600. So it was almost half the value of a new car to make a delivery. And then I decided at that point, in that moment in time, no, I'm not doing this, because then I'm in, and I'm going to be in for life.
You are.
So I made a decision. It was easy money. I didn't even have the tuition. I had no money at all. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do this on my own. And my mother was behind me. My mother always told me to stay away from those bad guys. So it was kind of, I'm sort of happy I did that, because I'd be dead or in jail today for sure.
So I think you kind of answered this, but I know that you have more to say on it. Why should young adults read this book?
Well, I think not only young adults, I think their parents as well. Older people should read it and say, hey, wait a second. So one of the girls has a little weight problem, and in the Bronx, the Spanish girl, and she gets involved with a mother in Ridgewood who really works it out with her. She helps her, and she becomes this knockout because she had all this self-esteem questions. The black kid that came to Ridgewood, New Jersey, his name is Jamal. Jamal? Samaj. I'm sorry, Samaj. Samaj thought everybody was prejudiced against him, and he was blamed for robbing a store, and he didn't do it. But he finds out at the end that they were not prejudiced about him, and it opens his eyes. And then it talks about interracial dating a little bit. It talks about the people who went to the Bronx and how they had to look around and say, "Hey, I can't get on this subway at 4 o'clock in the morning and get home alive. I got to be home at a certain hour. That's why there's a curfew at 9 or 10 o'clock, because after that, all hell breaks loose in the New York City subways. And if I'm on that subway, I'm going to get killed." And they learn that pretty quickly. They learn the streets pretty quickly. So, yeah, I think it's also about understanding each other, understanding each other's foibles, understanding each other's racial makeup, understanding each other's customs. I mean, I have a friend who doesn't want his son to be involved with this girl because she's Dominican, and he doesn't understand the customs of the Dominicans. He doesn't even know it. So he needs to go to the Dominican Republic and spend time and see what the culture is about. It's a wonderful culture. I go every year. So it's a culturally, people need to open their minds.
I agree.
And once that prejudice goes away, and once it's going to take a long time more for that to happen, but it's happening. I see it happening.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a teenager, if you saw a black guy and a white girl, or a white girl and a black guy, a mixed couple, you stared at them. We stared at them like, what the fuck? Excuse my language. That's a black guy and a white girl. Today, it's commonplace.
Right.
And no one's staring at them. I mean, it's just commonplace. It's like, okay, mixed cultures are acceptable today. In my day, it wasn't. So, and that's, it's 50 years, 60 years, but we're getting to be a kinder, gentler country. Although I'll tell you this, being an old white guy and hearing about the systemic racism in the United States, I absolutely agree with it. It's there. Systemic racism is absolutely an issue, and it's not an issue in the United States. You're a global network. It's an issue globally.
Yeah.
And the only way I think you could fight it is one at a time, one person at a time.
And I love, that's why I brought that up, because I like hearing that coming from an older white American who's, not one of us who's complaining all the time or whatever nonsense they want to say, but hearing it from someone else who's not in this, so to speak, but who understands it because of the fact that you grew up in the South Bronx. And I get where you're coming from. Back then, you was just the same as a black guy.
White, first of all, Italians weren't considered white until 1940. Right. I mean that. And I lived in a neighborhood.
Most of our youth understand that, though.
Absolutely.
Just the same, black, Puerto Rican, or Italian. You were all the same.
We were the same until 1940.
The white elites.
Now, in the neighborhood I grew up in, Arthur Avenue, also before I moved to the projects, a black person or a Spanish person were not allowed to walk through the neighborhood. They'd get stopped by the guys. What are you doing? Where you going from here? Well, we're going to the hospital. Walk around. They made them walk around the neighborhood. This was in the 60s and the 50s. And I remember it. I mean, now the neighborhood is fine. It's right near Fordham University. I go every week for lunch and have cigars with my friends. And it's a melting pot. Sure, every once in a while, a Dominican or a Puerto Rican drive by in their car and they're blasting the music. And it sort of like pisses me off because it's loud. It's loud, but I understand it. That's their culture. That's their expression. Let it happen. Let it happen. I mean, I don't like tattoos on people. People have sleeves of tattoos. That's cultural.
Oh, yeah.
That goes back to my grandmother who fainted when my uncle had a tattoo of the word mom on his arm, and she fainted. So, I mean, come on, man. And look at,
Well, yeah, because she grew up in a different time.
Different time.
But what I like, though, is that a lot of the stuff that you are talking about, and as you just mentioned, is in the book. It's some of it is very time-centered, but a lot of it isn't. A lot of the principles behind some of the stories are...
Thank you for saying that.
...timeless, and they are still very, very, very relevant. Plus, you're just interesting. You like to put murder and serial killers and all that good stuff in there. And that's what we all like to hear about, all the gory details. That's what we find.
I have to tell you, I want people to read the book. I don't care about making money. I made my money in my life. If you want to buy the book and I can make $2 on the book, thank you very much. I'm going to use the $2. But if you don't have the money, you can get it cheaper by going online. It's what do you call what is that called? Not audio book. It's not on audio books. It's on ebooks. But if you're in the United States and you don't have the money for it, send me a letter and I'll send you a book for free.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'll send you a book for free because I want the book to get into the people's hands. I don't really care about making the $2 per book. I don't. It's more of the
awesome.
it's more of the get the word out.
Yes, it's more about getting the information that's in there into people's brains and helping them to think differently. Storytelling is one of the best ways to do that.
You said you were an international, and I know you are very well known throughout the world. So I was doing a lecture at a library in Jersey, and this big kid comes up to me. He was 13, 14 years old. Handsome kid, blonde hair, blue eyes. He goes, I read your book before this lecture. And he had a little bit of an accent. He was Russian. And he said, wow, I am so happy to meet you. This book meant so much to me. His parents didn't speak English. They were Russian immigrants. He goes, now I know I can make it here.
Oh, wow.
I have to tell you, I almost fell into a puddle of piss. I mean, I was really so taken by him.
Oh, I would have started tuning up.
I did. And how I affected this young man's life by what I wrote. I won. As far as I'm concerned, I won.
I agree because I'm the same way. Totally agree. Now I'm going to give you a moment, Luis, to just talk to the teenagers out there for a minute who are listening right now. What do you have to say to them?
Well, this is the old man talking. Your life is what you want to do with it.
Yes.
If anybody tells you you can't do something, I'm going to say the word, fuck you. Just do it. Just go do it. Do it the best you can. I don't care if you're in North Africa or in Detroit, in the hood in LA. Don't let that shit be your life. Don't make it manage your life. Like I told you before, I had a son. He's still alive, but we don't talk anymore. Who went really bad, and he didn't have to go bad. We lived in a lily white, beautiful community. His two brothers graduated major colleges. They're both very successful businessmen. He himself is a successful businessman, but he's a drug dealer, not anymore, drug abuser, and a thief. And I couldn't have that around me. So imagine me having 3 grandchildren that I don't see. That breaks my heart. So don't do that to your family. Don't do that to yourself. Don't try to be slick because of whatever drugs are popular today. I don't even know what drugs are popular today. When I was a kid, it was heroin. And I think it might be back to that. Fentanyl, who the hell knows? All these bad things. And look at all the kids we bury. And look at all the people who meant so much to us, who could have affected our lives so well, like Michael Jackson, like all these great, great performers who died from drug overdose. They robbed us. So if you're doing that, you're robbing society. You're robbing your family. Never mind your mother's crying over your casket. That's bad enough. But you're robbing society of your positive possibilities. All I say is go do it.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Well, Luis, thank you so much for coming on. For those of you that are interested in his book, there will be a link to that book on his website in the show notes. And you can also, once you go to his site, you can go to the contact page if you need to contact him right on his site. So once again, Luis, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Fatima.
Enjoyable and fun talking to you.
I had a good time. Thank you so much.
And now for a mind-shifting moment. Let's talk about the title of this book, Zip Code. Your zip code is the area in which you live, within the U.S., Canada, and a few other places in the world. You might call them postal codes. But some of you listening don't have postal codes. That doesn't matter. You still have an area that you live in. And I want to say this to everyone listening. Where you come from does not have to define you. You do not have to follow the same path as everyone else around you. In fact, You should step outside the box, outside your postal code, outside your zip code, outside your village. Step outside of everyone else's expectation. That is where you can find true freedom. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow or subscribe to MindShift Power Podcast on any of our worldwide platforms, so you too can be a part of the conversation that's changing young lives everywhere. And always remember, there's power in shifting your thinking.